Cindy, you ready? You're up. Please rise to the pledge of allegiance. This meeting is being conducted in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. The Verona Board of Education passed a resolution at its meeting held on January 8, 2013. The meeting set forth the schedule of its regular meetings, which resolution was in 7 days of passage. The schedule was sent to the Verona Seabrook Times, the Star Ledger, the Herald News, the Township of Verona, and the Verona Education Association. Postings of this meeting setting forth the time, location, and agenda were posted in each of Verona's 6 schools, the board office, and town hall. This posting was also circulated by newspapers, all SEA presidents, and SEA liaisons. The Verona Board of Education operates under consent agenda format. Any board member has a right to have an item pulled to be voted upon or discussed separately. The copies of tonight's agenda and resolutions have been made available to the public present. Mr. Block, Mr. Elliott,
Here.
Mr. Molina,
Here.
Mr. Yunus,
Here.
Mr. Quattrochi.
Here. Okay, welcome to our August meeting. We do have some committee reports and updates to get through tonight. First off, do we have any public comment or question about any agenda item? Okay, we do have one presentation tonight. That's Jessica Pearson and Jack McAvoy concerning the project on Bloomfield Avenue in Westview and possible impacts to Lanning and Brookdale schools. And just for the record, when we do these, we try to keep them to about 5 minutes or so.
I'll try.
Keep it the board topic and we'll go.
First, we want to thank the board for allowing us to present. We think this information will be very important to you. And a little background, Jack and I both graduated Verona High School in 1984. And we feel very strongly about protecting this school system in particular just because it gave us such great opportunity in our lives. It sent us off to college and it was good. So in keeping with the educational venue, I would like to present this in terms of the fairy tale and the nightmare, reminding you that either way this story is told, physics, science, and truth shall prevail. You can decide whether you deem it the fairy tale as the developer would have you believe or the true nightmare we believe will unravel. The story of the princess and the pea. The developer's application attempts to represent himself as that pea. He's buried it under 40 mattresses. But we can't sleep at night thinking about it. And as it turns out, this pea will be the root of much upset for town. So I'm sure you know the properties at hand here. It's 176 200 Bloomfield Avenue. One property has the Stoneham House, and the other is the heavily wooded lot that runs 300 feet back up on a 52-foot elevation to the backyards of Montclair and Westview Road, Montclair Avenue. Last year, his plan was to level that via rock blasting, put a 9,500 square foot building on it with 2 floors above commercial, and the commercial was listed as retail salon, each having 7 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartments. And one of their witnesses said that there could be as many as 28 children, school-aged, living in that. He took the 3rd floor off because as you know, he was turned down, and now his building is the same building without the 3rd story and 8 apartments. So using their math, that could be 16 additional school-aged children, and we all know how 4 additional children can expand the need for additional classrooms and teachers. During his application before the board, his blaster came, as well as his engineer, and told us what they were going to do. Mind you, there was no testing of soil, no drilling, no boring, no environmental impact study, no regard for the children in the area, no traffic study, no testing whatsoever. The entire lot would be cleared of every single tree. The soil would be stripped, both against Verona code. The blasting would commence, and it was estimated to take at least 90 working days, which is about 4.5 months, providing 5 to 7 blasts a day, removing 30,000 cubic yards of stone. At this pace, according to his schedule, he would need a dump truck pulling into the property and off of the property every half hour, or at least every half hour, to keep a pace with the stone removal. So I want to talk about the traffic briefly, and then we'll come back to the inherent health issues that will be present. The developer ignored a request by Chief Huber to perform a traffic study in the area, but we found one. The last traffic study that was performed by the New Jersey Department of Transportation was April 2006, before the 7-Eleven was built. And in a random 13-hour, 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. day, 41,000 cars went through Bloomfield, Pompton, and Mount Pleasant intersection, 41,000. We also looked into the accident reports in the Verona Police Department and found that from before the 7-Eleven was built until present day, accidents more than doubled after the construction at the 7-Eleven site. As a matter of fact, right in the area of Brookdale's intersection. So what happens at a blast zone is 1,000 feet from the actual site of the blast, signs are posted, blast zone. Brookdale School falls within that blast zone. Then the blaster, the expert on site, will also determine a blast area. This is an area within that they want to contain the danger and beyond which the danger shouldn't exist. First, the horn will sound, traffic will be stopped, and then they'll make sure that all of the unauthorized people get out of the area, they'll connect the blaster, they'll perform the blast, and then they have to go in and make sure everything is detonated and that there's no undetonated material before public roadways can be reopened. This could be 15, 20 minutes. And you all know that traffic self-diverts. We don't know how the Verona Police Department is going to deal with this kind of an issue. They may divert traffic for us, or people, as I said, will self-divert and race up our side streets. And I believe that that will cause a major safety issue for the children in the area. Let's see. Going back to the blast area, that's supposed to be a secured area. Fly rock. It's something that can't be controlled, and I just want you guys to realize that it happens more often than not. They are missiles, they go through windshields, they go through metal, and they can crash through structures. They've killed people. So being that Brookdale Avenue School is in a blast zone, and Everett Field is right across the street, I would hope that this would be an issue of concern. Blast vibrations. Structures, they fray everybody's last nerve, they're scary, they're caustic. The noise, posing a major disruption throughout each school day. It will reverberate through town. If there is a cloud, if it is an overcast day, it will enhance the acoustics of the blast. The CDC and the chemicals. Detonating explosives releases nitrous oxide and carbon monoxide. It's apparent when you see a blast, the orange cloud that hovers, and there's no way to control in which way that cloud will move. The dust. Children with asthma and allergies will be heavily affected. Overwhelming dust generated by this project. Idling diesel trucks. Now we know that there's a 3-minute idle law, but I don't know how it's going to be controlled or mitigated with this kind of a circumstance. And if the developer brings a rock crusher on the site, the noise, the dust, and the pollution will be untenable. Remember, Brookdale's only 750 feet away. Lanning is only 1,350 feet away, and the field is right across the street.
And just since you brought rock crushers on, the state of New Jersey, if you bring a rock crusher on a construction site, and rock crushers, by the way, are prohibited in Verona. If you bring one on site, you require a mining permit. The bottom line is here, this site is going to become a mine. We're going to have a mine on Bloomfield Avenue, and we all know what goes with that. Rock crushers are very, very loud. They're louder than the blast, that's what we've got to worry about. This site, they're going to remove 30,000 cubic yards of material. That's 45,000 ton. It's 90, of course I did math, 90 million pounds of rock. They told us they were going to remove it with 1,700 truckloads. I honestly think that's a low number for them, but I think they skewed it, but that's what they told us. But that means there's 1,700 leaving the site with the rock in it. There's also 1,700 trucks going to the site to pick it up. Now, I'm making an assumption that they're bringing a rock crusher on site, but to make the assumption, it's pretty well based because it's a lot of rock with those numbers to process, and you have to, it's the easiest way to do it is to bring a crusher on site. So it's both likely and it's basically not impossible. So I just wanted to add that to the record. My reason for coming here is I wanted to give you info tonight on the effects on the utilities for blasting. And I'll be short. The blaster can apply for a permit to store explosives on site. Now, if he does that, bottom line is there's explosives within 750 feet of Woodbury. One concern. OSHA and New Jersey State Code both call for precautions to be taken when blasting around power lines, water lines, and gas lines. In fact, they won't allow blasting to occur within 50 feet of live electric lines or 200 feet of active gas lines. Note that every square inch of this property touches a utility at every single point. And as a matter of fact, a major gas line, I'm just going by record of times I've dealt with public service on Bluefield Avenue. I think it's a 12-inch gas line that runs up Bluefield Avenue. It runs on that side of Bluefield Avenue, and on Westview, there's a 4-inch gas line that runs down the center of Westview. So going 2 foot off of that, there's a 50 by 50 corner in the back corner of the property that doesn't touch. That's covered by the gas line on Montclair Avenue. So in order to safely conduct blasting, they will likely be required to shut them down. They don't have to tell residents, they don't have to tell businesses, and they don't have to tell schools. The blaster is only required to communicate with the utility companies. So at any time during the day, if they call and they find a danger, the lights will go out, the gas will be shut off, and the water lines will be turned off, lending to a major upset and interruption in and around that entire area. Also includes Lanning Avenue School. Lanning Avenue is only 1,400 feet away from this blast site. Corner to corner, we did a scale. Okay? We're talking about interrupting an already strained Verona business area, making vulnerable the safety of our schools, our homes, our professional offices, with no notice necessary. None at all. The toilets may not flush. That's a problem. The heat may turn off at any time. The computers, the lights, they can shut down at any time. They only have to notice the utility companies. So, I mean, with that, I'm going to go right to the 2 words you want to hear. In conclusion, our reason for coming here tonight was to try and make Verona parents aware of the direct and the indirect dangers of this project. It's the first phase of this project that's very harmful to the community. It's going to be what they say 4.5 months of blasting. The excavation could go farther than that. I'm sure they're saying 4.5 based on good weather. It could be a lot longer than 4.5 months, and it's going to hit the school year either way, either the back end or the front end of it, or it could be a full 4.5, 5 months in the middle of it. So that's our main reason for coming here. We've been at a ton of meetings, extremely stressed about this. One of our residents, and I'm just going to throw this in just so you know, one of the residents there, almost 80 years old. The couple next door, 80 and 84, they've lived there 52 years, the one lady. Her property is right on, her house is right on the back of the property line. Just an example of how close and how dangerous this is. But fly rock can hit her house just as quickly as it can hit Brookdale in the school. So I'm here to let parents know that there is a huge danger here. So thank you very, very much for hearing us. And if you have any questions, we'd be more than happy to sit and answer
Are
questions.
there any questions for Mr. White?
Well, the only question I have is that I appreciate the concern, obviously, but I still don't think that you're in the right venue here, personally. Have you gone to the council meeting? The only council meeting I
We've gone to council meetings.
didn't have anything to do with this.
We're hitting obviously we're going to the, last year was before Board of Adjustments, and it went 10 months. I think there were 12, maybe 13 meetings. The Board of Adjustments shot it down, and a 7-0 vote because of the third floor. So they were over the 50-50. This year, it just started last week at the planning board. And we're here also to try and get people to go to the meetings, even to ask questions and just be informed of how bad this really is going to be. The next meeting, planning board, is September 26th, so we're hoping for people to show.
I don't think that this is the wrong venue. I think that this is an appropriate venue just because it does affect the schools in the area, especially up in our,
The
The
children
children's-
and Mr. McAvoy have been to planning board meetings and the Board of Adjustment meetings, which is the entity that's been handling this for the town. They asked to present here to give the board a perspective on what they believe are the impacts of the schools on top of what they've done already.
and the safety in the area
So,
for the kids.
in preparing for this and speaking to Mr. Forte about the presentation tonight, one suggestion, I think, is that Mr. Forte, on behalf of the school, the superintendent, get in touch with the planning board. And I had 5 line items, but I think it's 3 points, to express to the planning board any way that we can have for the protection of the schools as part of the thing, given that Brookdale is within 1,000 feet. Not necessarily in any order of priority, but the effect and the schedule or anticipation of the blasting scheme, I'll call it, because I'm not sure what that, and the noise effect of that. So that's a noise effect.
And dust.
Well, I'm going to get to that in a second. So first is a noise effect disruption question. The second one is a diversion of traffic, where just living in the area, I can tell you that the total traffic, if you stop me from going down Woodfield Avenue, I'm going to zip down Sunset, which is where the kids all walk to and from school, and you do have kindergarten there midway through the day. So there's a traffic safety question around diversion of traffic. I think there's a knock-on effects, for lack of a technical term, around the dust, but more importantly, on 2 things that I think we have to be aware of. When toilets don't flush in the event of an outage, or we don't have electricity in the event of not having fire safety, we're not supposed to keep school in session, which puts us in a position of having to possibly inadvertently call school. You can't call school at the elementaries without getting parents to come, and if people working on it, the disruption could be very difficult. And then the last bit on that is, should there be damage to the school, to the building itself? We typically don't get into the building and do construction, especially in buildings that are old, because of asbestos and God knows what, covered. You do have to remediate something. So if there's a knock-on, unanticipated bit of damage to the building, what happens? Right? So my suggestion is that we get to the planning board, copy the council, and we're concerned for the proper functioning of the buildings. And it's not just, we talk about Brookdale, but I don't think it's just Brookdale, because of the backside of it.
I will say that blasters in the state of New Jersey are only required to carry $500,000 of insurance for structural damage and between $500,000 and $1 million for personal injury. That's all they're required to carry.
Yeah, and that's why I think the proper challenge is to raise the points that we would be concerned about to the township side that they can control, even though that might be a little required, we can protect ourselves in different ways. But I think if I could summarize what you did, what I heard is there's a combination of the blasting noise effects with empathy to the neighbors there, but that's outside the schools. The safety element of the traffic diversions and all that, and then the knock-on effect of whether it's M1, dust and haze and all that, or knock-on repairs that are anticipated on some of the windows break or something, or if utilities go out, that's a problem. The nastiness about having toilets flush is nasty, but if it's a school, it's a don't conduct school. If that happens, then if you don't have electricity if you don't have telephones, if you don't have fire system, if you don't have water flowing, if you don't have,
So more important one is the daytime. We could shut them down.
well, again, heat, there are laws around if the temperature goes below a certain amount, you still got, again, the badging to close the school. That's it. So for us, it's, anything that disrupts the school day, especially in an unscheduled way, I'm back to the storms, the hurricane, losing a week of school dilemma, and what happens. And in that case, we didn't have to fix anything, we just have to turn on the switches again, right? This would be potentially having to fix things as well. So I would suggest that we do that. Raise the school's concern around, gee, how would all this work and what are the possible impacts, and how do we mitigate it or make sure that the trouble is happens. I think the worst situation to be in is somebody said, well, gee, we didn't think you guys cared. Right? We're not there. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the time.
Okay, let's, do you have any discussion items for today?
Well, the only discussion I have is in our board packet, we have this board self-evaluation. Now, do we plan to discuss this at all, or?
We do. We had that scheduled at our last confidential with the one prior to that. By the time we got done with the confidential agenda, we had something like 4.5 minutes left in the hour, and then we had to be out here for the 8 o'clock. Even if we were to adjust this at the time, that's not. So it is something we need to do. We should schedule it for our next board. We should knock that out. I think we need to have the conversation what that is, because there is a pattern in there that has popped up for the first time that you and I have around how we self-evaluate. Something we're going to think about. Yes. So why don't we schedule that for the next confidential? Perhaps we can start the next confidential session at 10. Maybe we can start half an hour early, and that'll give us enough time to go through that. Okay, committee reports. Education first. We had an education meeting today. We covered both curriculum, in the general sense, and some special services items. So you should have a copy of the agenda in the packet. We talked about the press releases around our AP results. Our AP results continue the upward trend we started about 4 years ago. Once again, we set a new Verona record, both in terms of the number of students who participated in AP. We're now over 50% of the junior and senior population in Verona. We were, when we started this journey, we were less than 25% of those students participated in AP. Now we're over 50%. Again, another year with another all-time high. Our AP results are again in terms of the number of exams taken, we've grown from about 70 when we started the program improvement to about just under 370 exams. We expect there to be over 400 based on enrollments for this coming school year. So we will have another record year in the 2013-2014 year. In the HESPA results, we had our best HESPA results ever. This continues a 3.5 year, I'll call it, continuous improvement. Our partially proficient scores for both language arts and math have outperformed the district factor group average, and that's the first time that that's happened in both subjects in our history. Last year was the first time it happened ever in just language arts. This year we've mastered that both in math and language arts, and our advanced proficient results are the narrowest away from the district factor group average that they've ever been. If you turn it into the number of students, at about 165 juniors, we're about 12 to 15 students away from at least the district factor group average in HESPA. One thing that did not make the press releases, we're proud to say, for the second year in a row, and only the second year in history, we have graduates who are nationally recognized scholars, national scholars. Last year we had 3 students. It was the first time in history we've ever had national scholars. This year we have another 2, which is another testament to the changes that we've made. The ASK scores are in preliminarily. We'll have more by the end of September. The ASK scores on the surface continue the trend that we talked about in the spring, so they're all moving in the right direction, they're all improved. By and large, there are some areas that we already have identified for improvement. The reason why we haven't come out with those press releases and details yet is because we don't yet have either the district factor group comparisons. So when you say you've done better, it's hard to know whether better is better than the average or not as much better as the average. And we also don't have the clusters. If you remember, the ASCII series have between math and language arts about 11 subtopics of scores that make up the aggregate score. And we don't have that until the state doesn't release that until sometime late in September. So we'll get that end of September, beginning of October. One thing on the AP as well, we'll have at the end of in the spring, not the end of the year, but in the spring, we will have comparative data on AP. The reason why we look forward to that is because some of our results look like they're very, very good, and some of them look like we're struggling in some subjects. Preliminarily, the subjects that we seem to have struggled a bit are also the subjects where we had massive increases in the number of students taking the course. So, for example, historically in one of our social sciences courses, we historically had less than 23 kids ever in the class. Last year, we had over 55 taking that course. And our average performance wasn't as high as you'd want it to be. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't as high as you'd want it to be. We believe that's the dilutive effect of having so many kids take it. In other cases, though, AP chemistry, last year was the first time, prior to last year, we averaged maybe between 0 and 20% of the kids that took AP chemistry, between 0 and 20% of those kids ever got a 3 or better on the exam. Last year, 95% of the kids got a 3 or better, and this year, 100% scored a 3 or better. So the areas that we've focused on, we continue to make great progress, and there's areas that we have not yet focused on that are places that we need to continue keeping our sleeves rolled up. The other things we talked about were reading workshop is now being rolled out this year for grades K2. That's part of the curriculum plan. We talked about that last year. We have some new electives at the high school, again, taking place this year based on student interest and conformity with our new standards. History and Hollywood cinema is one, contemporary issues is another, and discrete math is a third. Charlie Miller, our director of curriculum, was particularly impressed with discrete math. When he was in school, he didn't get to take that, he said, until college, and we're doing it now for high school. We've also increased our dual enrollment this year, starting in September. We will have accounting, college level accounting through an effort with Syracuse University, and we are working on getting college credit in place for our AP calculus. So students who take AP calculus through Seton Hall may be eligible for college credit in calculus starting as soon as this current year. We're waiting for final approval from Seton Hall. They've got a list of requirements we've got to demonstrate that we can meet. It's unclear that we're going to get all those requirements in place for this school year, but we're shooting to try to get that done. A couple of other things over the summer. You probably read about this a lot in the mainstream press around the teacher evaluation systems and models. We're ready to go on that. We continue our training and professional development on that. We have activity going through July, this month in August, and in September we will have some joint efforts with partners in Glen Ridge School District. Today we had the new teacher orientation day, which feedback on that, at least preliminarily, was very positive. I think that's it on the general curriculum. Yep, we have a resolution tonight for two things. One is to kick off a basic skills program for the first grade. I think the best way to describe this one is it's somewhere north of being just a pilot, but it's south of being a district-wide formal program. We have an opportunity to give basic skills in the first grade a try. These are very distinct basic skill needs for distinct numbers of students that need the help. We're going to do our best to get it going this year. But it's a convergence of opportunities that we think is a good thing to go after. And hopefully we can grow this going into the subsequent years into a more formal program, maybe even into grade 2. In special services, our enrollment for preschool is in place. We have two classes of 3-year-olds, 2 classes of 4-year-olds. Child study team, we have 4 replacement personnel that you'll see on the agendas. One is due to a retirement, one is due to maternity leave, one is a medical leave, and the last one is a resignation where the psychologist, the district psychologist, is pursuing his private practice, and the need for his professional time is going to outweigh what he's able to do, so he's stepping down. We do have a concern around paraprofessionals. We are seeing some resignations to other districts of comparable size and caliber where it would seem that we're paying off the standard, below the standard. We have had as many as 5 resignations that we believe we can attribute to that this year, something that we need to consider as we prepare and go into budget season in November, December, January. Successful year in the summer school program, which is pre-K through grade 8. We had 47 students participate, which is a healthy number of students. Attendance was nearly perfect and consistent, which is a testament to the program and the students that participated in it. Very difficult to get consistent attendance in summer school, especially when it's voluntary. And student progress has been noted in all classes based on the results of the assessments that they've been given. We did review 2 particular cases of special services disputes, but nothing that's off the normal kinds of things. Any questions? All right. Athletics?
Sure. We have the last reading of the COC and SAP, so the code of conduct and civil dispute policy tonight. An update on the track will be coming from Buildings and Grounds. We have policy updates that will most likely be presented for first reading at the next meeting. Those are just the concussion policies and such, and we can always re-forward or put in the next board email a link to the soft copies of those. Tonight at 6 p.m., Mr. Frisian is currently attending the captain's trip to Yogi Berra Museum, and the captains are receiving leadership training and viewing inspirational speakers. So it's kind of a unique opportunity for our students. As well, Mr. Frisian will be presenting at the State AD Convention as well this year. So that's about it for athletics.
If I could just take a moment and go back to education for a moment. So Mr. Eunice and I reviewed, there are 29 policies in the docket for Education Committee to review and to present to the board for first reading consideration and subsequent. So we went through all 29 over the summer. It is on our agenda for the next Education Committee meeting in September. We do have some questions that are sort of rhetorical in a way, for the most part, that we want to get our heads around. Specifically around, many of these policies are legislated that we need to have, but the nature of the policy seems to simply echo what the legislation says. In other words, it's not anything that we would come up with, we believe, at the school board for Verona, but we're obligated to have some such policy that references the legislation. We need to understand what that means. The reason for that is because some of these policies do contain language that puts extra action items on the school district to do certain exercises around, for example, studies around diversity of the staff when we hire and targeted hiring around certain ethnic groups. We don't believe that that's something that we need to particularly monitor in Verona. We don't believe we have a problem around that, but but we do think that you can have a policy in place that echoes the legislation in the state that says we're an equal opportunity employer and there is no such thing as any form of discrimination that we accept. But to go in and say that every year we're going to do a census of staff, et cetera, seems to be a bit beyond the pale for us. So we need to understand where we need to conform and where we have latitude to make the best decision that we think for the district. We'll go through those at the next meeting. We'll bring them subsequent to the board.
So are we going to do another ed meeting or
The next ed meeting. Right now, so we talked about having a second one.
Your normal one would be September 10th, having two in September. Well, folks, just on
So
policy.
let's see what we have on the agenda for the time.
I guess, can we move it outside of 4:30?
Sure.
Or,
We'll work out the meeting time.
and then we just need soft copies as well for the Word document.
You don't have soft copies of policies.
Not for, yeah.
So you want to make the changes, just give me the,
I'm gonna make changes to that.
I would just keep it,
Keep it, yeah.
yeah, let's get through, like, what is it that we,
Okay.
let's agree on what we want to bring to the board as recommended changes to what these things. I think that's the next logic.
Yeah.
Because it would be unfair to the other board members to say, hey, there was some stuff in here we didn't like, we took it out, can't tell you what it was.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we were going to put those comments that we had in the PDF or not versus. Okay.
All right, finance committee?
Yeah, the finance committee did meet on kind of a last minute notice a couple of weeks ago, and specifically for the purpose of trying to come up with a recommendation for the board in terms of the whether or not, when we do go out for referendum, whether we should apply for a ROD grant, which is a regular operating district grant, or apply for debt service. We did solicit comments from various professionals, specifically our bond counsel. And we listened to what the bond counsel had to say, and her input was based on previous experiences, mostly, although there were some other factors included. While we did ask for some comparisons in terms of what it meant on a true dollar basis for us, we really didn't take a really hard look at that, per se. There's a number of ways of doing it. One of them would be a discounted cash flow. But in the long run, we applied the bird in the hand theory. We decided, after listening to everybody, even though the recommendation is somewhat against the grain of what the bond counsel had to say, is that both Mr. Elliott and myself felt that applying for the ROD grant, getting the money up front, getting as much money as we possibly can, was more valuable in the long run. So that was the recommendation to the board, and the board then passed that recommendation on to the architect, who's in charge of submitting the paperwork to Trenton, and that is the route that we're going to go. The board did agree, they did concur with our recommendation, and the board is applying for a ROD grant with a deadline of September 4th. And I don't know, you can go into that much. More about that
Yeah, I just want to point out the fact that the two options that were available were the ROD grant, which we could upfront receive up to 40%. It may not end up being 40%, but that's what the paperwork states, up to 40% of the eligible expenses associated with it. So not everything is eligible for the ROD grant. But the other option was the debt service aid, and when you look at it, it's really, from a revenue standpoint, revenue is probably the wrong word, but from a revenue standpoint, it's neutral. There's no benefit financially to doing either one or the other. The difference being, as Mr. Polino said, is that with the ROD grant, we get the money up front. I mean, here's the money that we're entitled to, and it automatically reduces the size of the referendum right off the top. Whereas if you go for debt service, they assist over the course of the bond, so over 20 years. For example, the last referendum that we went for, we did go for debt service, but really the reasoning at the time, the reason we did that is that the grant money had dried up, that the school corporation, I forget the name.
School construction.
The SEC, the School Construction Corporation, ran out of money much faster than they anticipated doing so, which is
I think they ran out of money a couple of years earlier.
when I say honest, yeah, it was dramatic how soon they ran out of money. But the debt service was still on the table at the time. This time around, we had the option of either going for the ROD grant, getting money up front, or applying for the debt service aid. And also, the reason that we needed to make a decision quickly is that the deadline is September 4th to get the submission to the state if we were going for the ROD grant. So we had to make that decision so that we could give our architects time to prepare all the documents for submission. And ultimately, weighing all that, it just seemed like reducing the size of the referendum up front was the best course of action.
We anticipate the referendum to be in the neighborhood of about $17 million. We're submitting paperwork for the ROD grant of about $13.3 million. What's left out is the athletic field. We've been told by Trenton that there's no way that they're going to include the athletic field in consideration for a ROD grant. We kind of knew that going in. We're also going to submit something else, the music room addition, which may or may not qualify as a legitimate cost. So even considering the fact that a certain portion of it is left out, and even if they don't consider the music room qualified, we still think that in the long run, 40% of what's left was basically in the neighborhood of about 10 or 11 million, still exceeds the value of waiting for our money for 20 years. So that's where we're at. The paperwork is...
Basically,
Okay. And in the paperwork, we see the paperwork is ready to be submitted, so we're ready to move forward with that.
And that's it. It was just one topic, and that was it.
The only other thing that I want to mention is that the audit is going to start on October 3rd. So we need
that's
to-
our normal annual fiscal year.
October 1st?
October 3rd.
Okay.
And when do they finish?
Issue down in a week.
It's due in December. They have till December 4th or 7th.
Just want to clarify one more thing. Ms. Polino throughout the presented number of 17 million, but I want to just make clear that will not, assuming, and there's no reason to not assume at this point that we will not be approved for the ROD grant, that number gets reduced by 40%, up to 40% of somewhere between 11 and 13 million. So potentially $3 million we'd be looking at reducing that by. So that's one of the reasons too. Is we're looking at netting down to maybe somewhere, and it's still somewhat preliminary, but we're zeroing in on it somewhere around a referendum to the public of 14 million.
Different buildings and grounds update.
I do. Buildings and Grounds did meet twice since the last meeting. We met on the day that we had a finance meeting, just because it all tied together, and then we met again this evening. One piece that we discussed this evening, the first meeting was primarily addressing the issues that Mr. Lee and I just discussed. But tonight we discussed summer projects and the updates. The Buildings and Grounds Department has certainly been busy installing drop ceilings at the VHS, new gym wall padding in the gym as well at the VHS, painting the gym walls. If you enter the high school and head down toward the cafeteria, you'll see that whole line of lockers has been renovated. Doors were taken off, repainted, new locks installed, and so they look great, just for a fraction of the cost. I think the expense on that was around $6,000, and it would have been $30,000 to replace those new. But they really do look as new. Something that certainly wasn't as visible, but is going to made in many ways more important, is that we were able to replace water valves throughout the high school. And if you recall, I reported through the spring, we had some issues with some of the bathrooms because we couldn't isolate the water to turn off the specific bathrooms to repair. So we were able to install these valves throughout the building so that we can now isolate specific issues. Once again, you don't see it, you don't necessarily, it doesn't have the visual appeal, but it's very important to running the building. Remodel of one of the bathrooms at the high school, girls' bathrooms at the high school, as well as the boys' team room. Placement of steps at HBW as well as Brookdale, and if anybody remembers what those steps look like, they were both in desperate need of repairs. So those are some of the bigger projects that were tackled as well as general maintenance, but they really did a great job. We talked about the scope of the projects, and Ms. Polino talked about that. At the last meeting, or maybe 2 meetings ago, I talked about the track issue behind HBW. and the costs that we have been quoted. We're working closely with the township and MKA to see how we can reduce that. And we think that perhaps we can cut that number close to 2.5 from what the last estimate was. There's a resolution tonight for use for the parking lot and its use of at the high school and its use by the band. There's a resolution to the issue. Before I get to what the resolution is, the issue is that when the band begins practice, typically there may be a car or two that have snuck in even though the parking lot's blocked off, and preventing them from using that space to practice, and that we know we have other field issues. So we don't have the space that we normally would for the band practice. So we're going to we recommend that the board hire essentially a trained and approved crossing guard at the rate of $75 per day for 14 days between September and October to help ensure that we can keep that lot clear of vehicles. I think that was it. Any questions or comments?
Just, if I can, I'm going to summarize for the public and maybe for ourselves to a degree, the steps and the timeline for the referendum overall, right? So what's happened so far is the board has given the engineering firm the list of things that we have identified ourselves as being self-defined as most in need of care, remediation, or facility improvement. Those improvements fall into 4 categories of science. One is, which is going to be the greatest amount, are remediations to the buildings. Things within our buildings that have begun to break down that need to be repaired. Heating system,
Right.
pipes, and those sorts of things. 2 are remediations specific to technology. So we had apropos to that, we had a massive server farm failure, for lack of a better description, over the last couple of days. That equipment is getting on 4 years old now, and this kind of stuff is going to happen no matter how we maintain it. And the technology is constantly evolving. So we do have provisions in there for technology upgrades throughout the district. We have number 3, provisions for building improvements that are specific to security improvements. If you remember, in the wake of the Connecticut shooting tragedy, we brought in some expertise to help us evaluate whether our buildings are properly secured, that we have the proper monitoring, locking, and surveillance that we ought to have, some combination of all that. I'll leave it to the experts to help define that. So number 3 are provisions for security, and of course, as Joe Polino said, number 4 is remediation for defects in high school. Now, so we submitted all that to the engineering firms back in the early spring, mid-spring, I think it was. Engineering firms then go out and they bring in whatever expertise they need to for those disciplines. And then when you get into the building, the expertise around the heating system certainly is going to be different than the expertise around, electrical systems. That engineering has been taking place through and until around the end of July or so. What they've done so far is they've put together everything we've given them to evaluate, plus whatever they've uncovered as in most need of repair or consideration for repair. And then the engineering firm does their own best estimate for what it would cost to tackle all the things on that list. That's the approximate $17 million number that Joe mentioned earlier. That is not the number of the bond, that is not the number of money, the amount of money that we're going to spend, and that's not the amount of money to pay for turf. Everybody's got that, right? So the headline should not be turf, $17 million. That's not what we're doing. The next thing that has to happen is the ROD grant paperwork has to be submitted to the state. That is simply to put a bookmark into the state by the filing deadline that we have a claim for this series of projects for state aid for any element of it that qualifies for 40% aid. That filing has to conform to state standards, and that's done by the engineering firms, and we received that yesterday, today.
Correct.
Right? And that's on its way now, and will be going to the state.
Shortly to the state.
That's non-committal. That doesn't mean that we are bound to that list of projects. That's to earmark and secure that that's our application has been filed, and we can adjust that application once it's filed.
Yeah, you can't adjust up, that's the thing, so.
You have to come in high.
Come in higher than.
You have to come in precise or high,
You,
right?
Right.
You can't come in
you
low.
can cut out, you can't add, you've got a list of projects.
Right, unlike how the state does everything else. The next step is that the board will have the engineers into a public board meeting, and we're trying to get some dates, so we'll be able to talk about dates that we can all make it at the next meeting. So we don't want to do this in the dark at night, which is why we didn't do anything. We didn't press to get these sort of meetings done in the summer. The right way to do this is to have a dedicated meeting that's properly advertised, with members of the public there to witness and experience what we're trying to do and why and how, and ask questions while we're all together. And then whether we need to break into further subcommittees and groups based on the topics that pop up, we can decide that. But we want to have EI and whatever other engineering disciplines they want to bring in a special meeting to walk through what they recommended that we tackle, what the magnitude of the work would be, and what it accomplishes for us, and then it'll add up to some estimate of time, disruption, and cost. Once the board and with public opinion is collected, and we finalize what we want to do, the engineering firm will then document to state standards for submission to the state for approval to have a vote. We have not received approval to have a vote because we've not submitted to get approval to have a vote. And we haven't submitted to get approval for a vote because we haven't documented anything. And we haven't documented anything because we haven't received the engineering reports yet. Okay? Once they document for approval for the vote, that will come in with a separate set of numbers, which may very well be different than the $17 million number that Joe just quoted. The reason for that is the state's standards for documentation have in it prescribed rates for a whole series of various bits of construction. So if you need 27 pieces of sheetrock, the state tells you you must use this number for estimating purposes, regardless what Home Depot wants and regardless of what the engineer said. So it's very likely that we will end up with a number that's bouncing around, even for the same amount of work. That would be the reason that happens up until that point. Once it's filed with the state can take some period of time. It could take a couple of weeks, hopefully. It can take as much as 3 months for the state to come back with questions, mandatory changes, whatever they want to opine on, before they give us approval on the engineering plan. So there will be a very iterative process at that point, where we still have the ability to change some degree of the project. Not lots of things, but as you go farther down the process, our ability to change things becomes less and less. Once the state approves the plan and we finalize it, then we can schedule a public referendum vote. Once we have a public referendum vote and the vote passes, then the process is we take all that paperwork and put it out to public bid. That's when we'll get another set of numbers where the construction crews will bid and say, well, regardless of what the engineer said, regardless of what the state said, regardless of what Home Depot said, my number would be X, I can do that project. And that will be the actual amount of money that needs raised. Right? The timeline for all of this is very, very unknown. We would love to be in a position to have this out to referendum in the late winter, February, March timeframe. There are 5 dates in the calendar year that we can have a referendum vote. November 5th, there is no way we will have everything I just described done and back from the state in the next 65 days. That's just not going to happen. There's a January date, there's a March date, there's an April date, and a September date. So we're not going to make the September date. That's in a couple of weeks. We definitely are not going to make the November date. We hope to make the February or March date. And we hope that we don't have to go into the April date. And the reason why those dates are so critical for us is, remember, as a school district, we've just been through this about 7 or 8 years ago. Most of the work that we need to do must take place when school is not in session, which means the end of June to the beginning of September. And if you miss that window, you're really going to be getting shovels, digging holes, and hammers hitting walls far ways out. The last thing I would say on the numbers, and for those of you that are here tonight, thank you for coming here in the middle of August, but if you come to the next week, you're going to hear me say this a dozen times. I can't stress this enough. When we did our last bond referendum in 2005, the amount of money that we raised was $33 million. And we returned a little over $1 million of that to the taxpayers of Verona, which was the excess interest on the money that we earned while it sat in the bank as the projects were being paid for. We returned everything back with minor exception to the taxpayer. When we did that $33 million project, the recommendation from the engineering firm was 60-odd million, close to $70 million worth of work. By doing 33, we left about another $35 million worth of recommended repairs on the table. That was in 2005. So we have that $30-odd million worth of, because that stuff didn't fix itself. So anything that was in disrepair in 2005, I can assure you is in disrepair today and needs to be remediated. Plus, there's 8 more years of 2,200 students running up in the buildings. And I, parent of 3 kids, I know what they do in my house, so I can imagine what happens here. Add all that up, and we're trying to keep the number as fiscally responsible as we can, but at the end of the day, it's going to cost money to remediate the things that we need to remediate. And it's, again, to bring it full circle, it's important to remember, the project has 4 elements. The greatest element of which is building remediations, technology, security-oriented building remediations, and then lastly, the field remediation of the high school. Okay? And then finally, on the bit that the aid does not probably, or definitely doesn't qualify, the football field remediation does not qualify for aid. Football fields or athletic fields in the state don't qualify for aid. There's nothing about the Verona football field where the state said, nah, that's just not qualified. State aid is not used for fields, period. Okay? And even within the building, certain elements of it qualify, meaning less than 40% for some things, etc. So we need to get through a whole load of math between now and vote day, and about 6 or 7 steps, of which we're somewhere between step 2 and step 3 right now. That, and I was very long, but I tried to be as in-depth as I could to save you guys a brief. I intend on saying what I just said every meeting I possibly can.
The only thing that I might add to that is maybe we should kind of worry about our terminology because, and we're using it interchangeably here, football field and athletic field. And what we're striving to do is to remediate the athletic field as opposed to the football field, even though primarily it's being used now, it was used as a football field. We feel with the remediation, and only a small part of it is actually going for the turf, but most of it is going for the remediation to cover the landfill problems that we have there, and the drainage problems that we have, the contamination problems, and also the sinkholes. Is that if we can get an artificial surface on the field, it truly can be an athletic field that can be used by all the athletic teams, not just the football team, the soccer team. And the band as well, and the lacrosse team. So what we really need to do is get away from saying we're going to remediate the football field. We're going to remediate the athletic field because what we hope to put in this place is an all-purpose athletic field that will be used by more students than ever used it before. That's what we hope to accomplish.
Yeah, and I would echo what Joe said. It's a great point. The reason why Toledo Field here at the high school has been limited to football only in the last 6 years or so, I'd say, it's maybe 7 years now, is because we had in engineers, field engineers, we had in field maintenance crews from Montclair State and from Rutgers University to recommend how to properly upgrade that field so that we could use it for more than what essentially is a half a dozen games a year. And 100% of the expertise that we brought in at the time said the only way you could do what you want to do and use this for more than a couple of days a year is to tear it up. That was the only, and what we ended up doing was having to shut it down. The grass, the field, because of the drainage issues and everything else, the type of soil, etc., the field would get trampled just from the couple of football games in the fall, and it would need the entire, because grass doesn't grow after Thanksgiving, not in New Jersey, and it would need the entire spring to repair itself without anybody using it. So that meant band, lacrosse, soccer.
And the problems we ran into, if you recall, is that once lacrosse started using that field, once the program really got up and going in high school, it was literally, it never recovered, and we were got into a very bad position with that.
Right. So the reason why it's only been used for football is because it's been such an unusable piece of property, and it must be fixed. We have to address it. We are being irresponsible if we don't address it and just hope for the best. Okay, superintendent's report.
Okay, yesterday on Monday, we had the Own the Room workshop here. We had about 50 people in the morning, and we had about 60 people in the afternoon. Total of about 110 people came through. It was very well received by our staff, by visitors, guests from all around. I think it was a great opportunity. Our board president was there, and he enjoyed it as well. Our summer projects.
I'm sorry, can I get something about that? So I do want to thank Bill, pronounce his name correctly, Hooter, for volunteering to doing this. There is an element of, he did it for select of us for free. There was people outside the district that paid the fee, and he has graciously offered to donate that money to the school district as part of helping us raise various forms of revenue. In my 30-year career, I've been through Rambo-like training on speaking and all kinds of other management training programs. Almost, I have to say, and this is not to just pay Bill back somehow, but I have to say, what he did in just a half a day was something very, very different than anything I've been through before, and I've been through a lot of this stuff. And I found it very, very helpful. More importantly, though, it was another example where in Verona, the people that were in this room in the morning session that I was at, because it was a separate session in the afternoon, second one took to the morning, I met educators from Livingston, West Orange, from the Newark school system, and a dozen others that were here. Most of the folks that were here were visiting Verona for the first time. And then by the time the morning was over, we were not only impressed with the program itself, but very thankful to Mr. Forte for putting the thing together and inviting them, because they really felt that they got a lot out of it.
It was a great, I think it was a great event, and an amazing person to donate that. But he paid for his people. Some of the people that were there to fly in from one person was coming from Africa, another person was coming in from California to do this workshop. So he really donated a service at an expense to him, and also donated any proceeds to the school. It was a pretty amazing event.
He did a longer presentation a few days prior, 3 days on Creative Live, which is part of Adobe. And you can actually, I kind of watched that one, to schedule a conflict on the day that I was supposed to attend it. But that one's also fantastic as well. You kind of purchase anytime access to it, but it's called Creative Live, it's live as well. Fantastic.
Pretty nice. Our buildings and grounds summer projects are going well, as well as our curriculum projects. Mr. Quattrochi touched on a few of the curriculum areas. In the buildings and grounds areas, you'll see some changes to the front entrances of the middle school and Brookdale. Our team room in the high school has been repaired. Our gym's been painted, new mats. So we're working on some projects that weren't covered in that referendum, just to continue with our regular maintenance program. Mr. Quattrochi touched on some of the training we're doing. Friday will be our first Friday folder for the year. Our tech update, we touched on it a little bit, but our technology right now, our system is down. We are making progress. We have people in here working until 10 o'clock at night, even later, and they are making some progress. We are able to log onto the network to get the internet back up. They said to me the next thing will be the email, so we're really hoping and crossing our fingers that we get the email back up tomorrow.
And just point out that on the technology, we're pretty much limited to an email and certain files. Our student information system is unaffected. Our internet access is unaffected. Our firewalls are unaffected. Our network itself, the connectivity is unaffected. It's essentially an email, and then there are some subset of school district files that are affected.
Correct. And our strategic goals for today, I did include in your packets that I handed out, not the packet that you got in the mail. But this is the packet that I handed out in the private session. There's a group of strategic goals. These goals come directly from the strategic plan. These were put together by all the department heads of each individual department that applies. Like, for example, the first one is finance, so this one was done with Ms. Nardino. Education was done with Mr. Miller, Mrs. Skinner, and so on. If you want, I can go through all these, or we can talk about the next meeting.
Let's do it at the next meeting, because I think by and large the board just received those, so that will be emailed down. There was a hard copy of the phone, we didn't get it out of the email over the weekend. So why don't we solicit board feedback between now and the next meeting on the 10th, and then we'll have it as an agenda item on the 10th. We can have a bit of a work session to tweak it and make changes to it, and then resolve it that meeting. That's put to rest. If it becomes more involved, we do have to be later in the month of September.
That's the end of my report.
Any questions for Mr. Forte? Now let's do resolutions.
Just have some, wording just need to change a little bit. On the private minutes that the board has, the public's not. After the meeting was called to order at 7 p.m., I'm going to insert as presented by Mr. Forte. And then on resolution number 31, that should read that the board approved the voluntary, non-compulsory student accident insurance provided by the Bollinger Insurance Company. Mr. Bolino made the point that he didn't want it to look like the board was providing this insurance.
Yep, that's right. Yep. Okay. That's,
So we've been doing them not by committee, but we've done them as a whole the last time.
I think we could do it by the whole. It might be a question or two.
And then we also have two addendum resolutions, personnel resolution and buildings and grounds. And I should point out that the buildings and grounds resolution, we had done this at the last meeting, and the site surveyor services was $4,800. But after that meeting, we found that there was an issue with soil there, like the same results as
Back at the
tennis courts and parking lot. Right.
I talked about that, I think, the last election.
Right, so now that the services are $7,000.
So that's not an additional 7. That's
No.
bumping it from 4,800 to.
Right.
Okay.
So resolve that the board approve resolution number 1 through number 41 and addendum resolutions 1 and 2.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Bolino, seconded by Mr. Elliott. Any questions?
I don't have a question, just as much as acknowledging, in resolution 3.1, there is the retirement of Maurice Jackson, better known as Mr. Jackson. Certainly, anybody who's had children attending Manning Avenue School is familiar with Mr. Jackson and what a beloved member of the school community he's been over the years. So I'd like to thank him for his years of service and certainly wish him a wonderful retirement.
I just want to echo that point too as well. I think I had him as a
Yeah.
definitely, and we are so lucky to have our buildings and ground services in-house. There are so many districts who have tried to save costs by moving out of house, and it compromises safety, it compromises our ability to save money in the repairs that we do, and it compromises somewhat around the culture of our schools, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these custodians, these maintenance staff know our students, know our children, and that's important, right?
I have a comment and a question. I'll start with a comment, which is co-curricular athletics resolution number 24, which is the second reading of our substance abuse policy and our pupil discipline code of conduct. That this formally and officially ends 24/7 policy. We no longer have a 24/7 policy once we vote on this tonight. And, after an extensive length of time of studying it with the community and the staff and then internally as a board, this is what we've come up with. And we now are in compliance, hopefully, with what the state says we should be doing in terms of either pupil discipline, substance abuse, in terms of it being effective only against acts that happen on school grounds or in school events, with the exception of sale of drugs and things along those lines in terms of
Just a footnote, as well as any act that can be tied back to enduring the welfare.
Correct.
So it's not just free and clear, the 24/7, does, we would not call it 24/7, but kind of codify that as just, if it can be tied back or linked to the school welfare of that child or others, then, and it's outside of a school event, then yes, it would fall under our policies.
We have about another 3 minutes to go for the 24/7. Okay. The other, I do have a question on the finance, number 30 is a tuition rate for an LLS class. Now, is this a new class that we're starting to do? Generally, tuition are kind of budget, but is this something we never had before?
It is that new class that we had in the budget, except that we didn't put any enrollment in there because we didn't know who was.
Two different right now.
No,
How did you come up with this? Is it just something you figured out?
yeah, based on the teacher, the supplies, everything we put in the budget, and then when they gave me the number of students, that's how I came up with that rate.
Do we have, are we going to have students for that class?
Yeah, that was the ones that we talked about in education.
Okay, great, okay, sorry.
I want to just acknowledge the number 28 and 29 under finance. It's just, I want to recognize the donation in both those cases. So thank you.
There's one on number 2. We should mention that. Resolution 2.2. Resolution 2.2, under new staff, is the announcement that Mr. Glenn Stevenson will be hired tonight as the district math and science supervisor. He's currently working in another district. He'll have to give his notice tomorrow. We hope to have him before November 1st. That's what we put in there on it before. And we're very happy to have him join the district. This was a long process to find the right person, the right fit for the district to move us forward into the 21st century. So, and the team is very happy with the selection. Okay, let's call the roll.
Mr. Elliott?
Aye.
Mr. Molina.
Yeah.
Mr. Yunus?
Aye.
Mr. Partridge?
Aye. Okay, let's open up to any question or public comment.
Change things around from us. Anita Beal, 15 Howard Street. In reference to what Jessica and Jack were up to us at the end of the meeting, I've been in an elementary school working from kindergarten through 5th or 6th grade for 36 years. And I have to tell you that it doesn't take much to get children off task, in that the educational process just like that is gone. And if they're talking about 7 to 9 blastings a day with a whistle going, and then windows rattling or breaking, or a building being hit with something or whatever, you're going to see a difference in what the children in those two schools learn over the period of that testing. There's going to be a great deal that they're just going to lose the continuity of. Teachers talking about one thing, it blasts, suddenly you're onto a whole different subject. So I hope you'll be aware that you should see something different in your testing, your grades, whatever that would be. And if there's flyaway rock, I hope you'll give thought to children out on the playground. You don't know how far that rock will fly, We don't know how much things are going to shake. If the ground shakes and the dust comes up into the air, you're going to have kids with breathing problems too. So be aware that it's not just trucks and whatever. Be aware that there will be a difference in what happens in those two schools.
Good point, thank you.
That horn, even in middle school, the horn that's were attached. Next grade, I remember learning that building every time it went off, everyone just kind of stopped for that period of time teaching. It's just inevitable to have noise.
Anyone else? All right, our next meeting is on September 10th. We have a confidential session. We've changed to 6:30 that night. We'll do the board self-evaluation as part of that. And then public session at 8 o'clock. No meeting after this, right? Good night, thank you.